Hell reigned above the skies of Kolombangara Island, close to the island of Guadalcanal. First Lieutenant Jefferson J. DeBlanc of the U.S. Marine Corps was engaged in a desperate fight against overwhelming odds. Japanese Zeros and other fighter aircraft were above, below, and behind him, seeking to strike him down. The able Marine destroyed 3 enemies in a few minutes, and the Japanese sought revenge. Long gone were DeBlanc's Wildcats and Allied bombers. He had decided to stay behind to cover their retreat, and he had succeeded. It was now time for him to turn tail and live to fight another day. While maneuvering, DeBlanc took down 2 enemy fighters with his machine guns, but the triumph was not without a cost. His Wildcat was shot multiple times, and fuel began to leak. The Marine was forced to bail out and act lifeless as he descended toward the unforgiving ocean with his battered parachute. Once in the water, a wounded DeBlanc swam without rest to the shores of Kolombangara. As he approached, DeBlanc saw people gathering at the beach. They were islanders, and they did not look friendly. Armed with spears and other weapons, they made gestures at him. DeBlanc, thinking of tales of cannibalism, reloaded his M1911 as he reached them. Fighting the Japanese in the air was one thing. Surviving in the jungle, surrounded by cannibals, was another. In the 1930s, as tensions rose globally, the United States, though initially neutral, prepared its youth for defense. A significant military expansion was underway, with young Americans across the nation being recruited, ready to protect their homeland if called upon. Such was the case of Jefferson Joseph DeBlanc from Lockport, Louisiana. Born on February 15, 1921, DeBlanc joined the U.S. Naval Reserve from his state in July 1941, after attending Southwestern Louisiana Institute, where he studied math and physics. He left junior year to join the Navy, becoming a seaman second class. The eager American was then transferred to Naval Reserve Aviation Base in New Orleans for 2 weeks to receive flight training. DeBlanc then went to Corpus Christi, Texas, to complete his training and become an aviation cadet. On October 15, 1941, DeBlanc's naval enlistment ended under honorable conditions. Shortly afterward, the pilot was appointed an aviation cadet in the USNR and commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps Reserve. When war finally broke out with the Empire of Japan, DeBlanc received the call of duty and relocated to San Diego, California in May 1942, joining the headquarters squadron of the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing. Combat in the Pacific was calling DeBlanc, and he was all in. While the Marines and the Navy desperately tried to fend off the violent advance of the Japanese Empire in the Pacific after the fall of the Philippines, 2nd Lieutenant DeBlanc was assigned to the Advanced Carrier Training Group, where he remained under instruction until August 1942. DeBlanc was assigned to the new pilots pool in October until he was posted for Marine Fighting Squadron 112, or VMF 112, which was part of Marine Aircraft Group 11 in the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing. 2 weeks later, DeBlanc left the U.S. and reached Guadalcanal on November 1, 1942, only 2 months after the Marines' landing. DeBlanc's unit flew the F-4F Wildcat fighter, a rugged aircraft with a unique gull-wing design and sturdy build that could take a beating and keep on fighting. Powered by a Pratt & Whitney R-1830 twin Wasp engine, it packed a punch with 650 caliber machine guns ready to blast anything in its path. What set the Wildcat apart was its versatility, becoming an essential asset for the U.S. Navy and Marines during the early stages of the war against Japan and Germany. Whether it was duking it out over the Pacific or defending convoys in the Atlantic, this plane was always up for the challenge. Its pilots knew they could count on it to get the job done, no matter what. As November neared its end, and the Japanese Army and Navy attempted to regain control of the island, DeBlanc's aerial skill was tested aboard his Wildcat. The Japanese dispatched a unit of Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers with an abundant escort of Japanese Zeros and other aircraft. The aim was to torpedo the Navy vessels near the area to prevent the landing of additional men and supplies. Unfortunately for them, DeBlanc's VMF 112 squadron intercepted the enemy formation and swiftly went after the Japanese. The audacious pilot charged toward the enemy without fear. Daring dogfights followed between the escort and the interceptors. Despite being slower than the Zeros, the Wildcats held their ground and opened fire with their Browning machine guns. Using all his training, DeBlanc maneuvered with tactical precision, avoiding the Japanese sights and shooting down 3 of the G4M Betty bombers, paving the way for his first victories, with more to come. DeBlanc's impressive dogfights during the interception of the enemy bombers saved the lives of Marines and sailors fighting at Guadalcanal, ensuring a constant flow of supplies. It also showed the Air Command what he was capable of. The Marine pilot was promoted to first lieutenant in December 1942, while his unit continued protecting the skies over the island of Guadalcanal. On January 29, 1943, the heat of battle raged over Iron Bottom Sound, a stretch of water between Guadalcanal and Savo Island. DeBlanc, fearless as ever, found himself in the thick of it with his fellow Marine pilots. The Wildcats roared through the sky, their Browning machine guns blazing. Suddenly, disaster struck the Marines. Enemy fire ripped through DeBlanc's fighter, forcing him to ditch in the ocean. As the aircraft plunged into the sea, DeBlanc braced for impact. The Marine pilot miraculously survived and quickly emerged from the wreckage, battered but alive. When all seemed lost for DeBlanc, salvation appeared on the horizon, an American destroyer racing through the waves to escape the Japanese onslaught of an air raid. With adrenaline rushing through his veins, DeBlanc made a daring leap into the stirring waters, swimming desperately towards the ship's safety. Bullets and bombs filled the air as the frantic naval battle continued, but the Marines' determination never wavered. When DeBlanc finally reached the safety of the destroyer, he was pulled aboard. Despite the ordeal, DeBlanc's spirit remained unbroken. As the American destroyer steamed towards friendly shores, DeBlanc was ready to take to the skies again and face whatever challenges the Imperial Japanese Air Forces could muster against Allied troops. Two days after the incident over Iron Bottom Sound skies, First Lieutenant DeBlanc was patched up and flying again with his men aboard his reliable F-4F Wildcat. The First Lieutenant now had a new mission. He was the flight lead of 6 Wildcats tasked with escorting a formation of SPD Dauntless dive bombers on their way to Kolombangara, New Georgia, in the Solomon's Chain. First Lieutenant DeBlanc led his Wildcats with determination straight into the heart of enemy territory. As they climbed at 14,000 feet, a swarm of Japanese Zeros descended upon them, shielding the enemy's surface ships. DeBlanc wasted no time, joining his comrades in a fierce air battle against the Japanese fighters, protecting the friendly bombers diving below in the chaos that followed. One of the SPDs called for help after it was attacked by Japanese float planes at a mere 1,000 feet. DeBlanc broke off his engagement with the Zeros, plunging into the fray to disrupt the savage assault. With swift precision, the Marines single-handedly disrupted the attack of the float planes, ensuring the safety of the dive bombers as they struck the Japanese ships. DeBlanc remained in the location, even after the bombers left the area. He was alone, facing off overwhelming odds. Undeterred by the Japanese numbers, DeBlanc bravely engaged them, destroying 3 hostile aircraft and scattering the rest. Despite sustaining damage to his own Wildcat, he continued to fight, engaging 2 Zeros closing in from behind. DeBlanc unleashed his fury upon the enemy in a brief yet intense skirmish, downing both adversaries. However, his victory came at a cost, as enemy fire engulfed his aircraft, forcing him to bail out over enemy waters. It was a daring act amidst the perilous skies between Vella La Bella and enemy-held Kolombangara. The Marine had destroyed 5 enemy aircraft in a few minutes and was now traveling to strange waters. Despite being wounded by shrapnel, DeBlanc made his way toward the shore of Kolombangara, where he was taken in by a group of natives that later sold him to another tribe for a bag of rice. Following his instincts, the Marine took the spear of one of the islanders to assert his dignity and show them he was not one to mess with. As a result, the natives took care of his wounds and later took him to the home of a local Anglican missionary who put him in contact with the coast watchers. After days of surviving on the island, contact was made with a PBY Catalina bomber to pick him up. A promotion to captain in June 1943 opened a new chapter of his military career. Joining BMF 122 in July, he swiftly adapted to his new squadron's rhythm. He returned to the U.S. within 6 weeks, stationed at Marine Base Defense Air Group 41 in Santa Ana, California. Assigned to Headquarters Squadron 41, DeBlanc spent the remainder of 1943 at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. However, the winds of change blew again in December 1943, when he transferred to Headquarters Squadron, Marine Aircraft Group 32. His next assignment took him to VMF 461, where he served at Marine Base Defense Air Group 43 in El Centro, California. In November 1944, Captain DeBlanc embarked on his second tour of duty, this time in the Central Pacific. Flying with VMF 422 in the Marshall Islands until May 1945, DeBlanc then joined VMF 212 for the intense Okinawa campaign, the last Imperial stronghold before invading mainland Japan. Throughout his service in the Ryukyus, the ace pilot shot down another Japanese aircraft, bringing his total victories to 9. The rest of the campaign was uneventful, and the captain returned to the United States in October 1945. DeBlanc was stationed at Naval Air Station Seattle in Washington until Japan was entirely occupied by the victorious forces and demilitarized. In a grand ceremony held at the White House on December 6, 1946, esteemed Navy and Marine Corps pilot DeBlanc received the Medal of Honor from President Harry S. Truman, who lauded DeBlanc's remarkable bravery in the Solomon Islands on January 31, 1943, where he displayed unparalleled valor above and beyond the call of duty. DeBlanc's courage was not limited to this singular act. He also earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for his heroic exploits, the Purple Heart for his wounds sustained in battle, and the Air Medal with 4 gold stars for his meritorious achievements in aerial flight. His illustrious service also garnered him a Presidential Unit Citation, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 3 bronze stars, the American Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal. After his discharge from active duty on December 31, 1945, DeBlanc returned to Louisiana, where he assumed command at Marine Air Reserve Group 18 as a member of the Corps Reserve. Upon his return to civilian life, DeBlanc pursued a career in education, earning degrees in physics and mathematics from Southwestern Louisiana Institute in 1947, a master's in education from Louisiana State University in 1951, and a doctorate in education from McNeese State University in 1973. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Blanc dedicated himself to teaching mathematics and physics to middle and high school students. His legacy as an aviator and educator endured until his passing in Lafayette, Louisiana at age 86 on Thanksgiving Day, November 22, 2007. DeBlanc, Louisiana's last World War II Medal of Honor recipient, is survived by a legacy that includes 3 sons, 1 daughter, and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He was buried with full military honors at St. Michael's Cemetery in St. Martinville, Louisiana. His prized spear from Bella Lavella and his Medal of Honor are now displayed at the National World War II Museum, serving as a tribute to his valor and the sacrifices of all who served.